The year was 2014, the same year Apple force-fed the world U2's Songs of Innocence album on every iPhone. Moria skipped the tracks every time one came on. Just the name U2 was enough to make her groan. Despite her lifelong love for music and her brother's love for Bono during her childhood, this band had never sparked her interest. Moria was 24, living in a quiet town with her husband and young son. Her days were occupied with studies, and her late nights were increasingly taken over by meditation, a practice she had only recently discovered. Her husband, on the other hand, was rooted firmly in the material world, skeptical of anything spiritual. It was during one of her evening meditations that she first saw him, not her husband, but a figure in her mind's eye, a man she had never met, yet whose presence felt achingly familiar. She visualized him as if she were calling out across dimensions, and something deep inside whispered back. Her husband didn't understand. He missed their evenings on the couch, watching movies, sharing snacks. But Moria had slipped into another world, and guilt tugged at her even as her soul reached for something more. The next morning, out of nowhere, a message arrived in her Google Hangouts inbox. A man named Leo had commented on a psychedelic image of a tiger she had posted. At first, she barely gave it a thought, until the private message arrived. "Hey, I was drawn to you." Moria hesitated. She wasn't sure what to make of it and replied vaguely, Interesting." Leo responded quickly, asking if they could continue the conversation on Facebook. Weird, but why not? She thought. Their chat soon turned into late-night phone calls. The first time they spoke, Leo's voice was so faint, it was as if he was calling from another universe. And maybe, in a way, he was. At one point, Leo said, "I can heal you." Moria needed healing. She knew that. But she didn't really thought more of it. She just knew this connection was beyond special. She felt as if they've known each other in another life. Over the next 2 days, they spoke constantly. Texts, calls, endless streams of words that fed a hunger in Moria she hadn't even known she carried. Then, suddenly, Leo vanished. A day and a half of silence stretched out painfully. Moria was devastated. She cried, shaken by the intensity of her longing. She thought of E.T., like her friend from another world had been called home. But the universe wasn't done with her yet. Articles and memes about twin flames began flooding her social media feeds, as if the universe was nudging her, whispering, "Pay attention." One rainy morning, on the way to drop off her son at daycare, she spotted a torn scrap of paper floating in a puddle, half hidden under a leaf. Something told her to pick it up, but embarrassment held her back. What would people think? On the way home, she found the courage to scoop it up. At home, she unfolded the paper. Written there, impossibly, was Leo's name. Chapter 2. Moria sat at the kitchen table, with the paper trembling between her fingers. Leo's name stared back at her like a secret the universe had slipped into her pocket. How was this possible? They were thousands of kilometers apart, strangers who should never have collided, yet here they were, tangled in a magical mystery which at least Moria didn't fully understood. Her husband came home that evening in his usual cloud of tired silence. He dropped his keys on the counter, scrolled absently through his phone, and muttered about work. Moria's heart pounded in her chest. Should she tell him? Should she confess the pull she felt toward a man she'd never met? But when she looked at him, at the man she had once dreamed of building a life with, she saw only distance. She saw the gap between them widening with every breath. "You never sit with me anymore," he mumbled later that night, eyes fixed on the flickering TV screen. I need time for myself," Moria murmured, curling into the corner of the couch, her mind already drifting to Leo's voice, his words, his world. That night, she lay awake long after her husband fell asleep. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the old floors. She closed her eyes and imagined Leo, imagined him meditating, imagined him reaching for her across the astral plane. She imagined the way his words had cracked her open, filled the lonely spaces inside her with color and sound. In the days that followed, they built something fragile and electric. Leo taught her about Reiki, telepathy, remote viewing, Kundalini, and the astral plane. She sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, her laptop open, scribbling notes, practicing the breathing techniques he described. "Your energy's shifting," Leo said one night over the phone, his voice a low hum in her ear. "I can feel it from here." She smiled in the dark, a blush creeping across her skin. But beneath the wonder, tension was growing. Her husband grew restless, suspicious of the way she clung to her phone, the way she slipped away to meditate, the way she smiled at texts she wouldn't explain. "Who are you talking to all the time?" he asked one night, his voice sharp, cutting through the soft glow of their living room. "No one, just a friend." He didn't believe her. She saw it in his eyes, and it was impossible not noticing her happiness. One evening after dinner, her husband settled onto the couch, eyes fixed on the television, the familiar glow flickering across his face. Moriha moved through the quiet rhythm of her chores, gathering laundry, her mind half drifting elsewhere. As she emptied his jacket pockets, her fingers brushed against something crumpled. She pulled it free, a receipt, a restaurant, dinner for two. Her chest tightened for a moment. She remembered the girl from his work, the one who had invited him out. He had told Moriha he'd said no, had dismissed it like it was nothing. She stared at the slip of paper for a beat longer, then folded it back into the pocket without a word. Why say anything? She was already gone, in her own way, lost in the world she was building with Leo, where the edges of her old life were already starting to blur. Chapter 3. One night, after another argument with her husband, Moriha called Leo, her voice shaking. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Everything's falling apart here." "It's because you're awakening," Leo said gently. "You're seeing the truth now." "But I feel like I'm betraying him. I feel like I'm breaking." "You're breaking free," Leo corrected softly. The next morning, while walking her son to daycare, she felt it again, that invisible thread pulling her towards something she couldn't name. She caught herself watching the sky, wondering if Leo was looking at it too, wondering if his thoughts were brushing against hers. More and more, her life split into two worlds, the ordinary one she shared with her husband, and the extraordinary one that existed between her and Leo. And then came the question, the one that terrified her and thrilled her all at once. "I love you, Moriha. Would you come meet me sometime?" Leo asked one night. Her breath caught in her throat. "Where you want to meet?" Moriha asked. "Well, it's up to you. It could be in California or in Morocco." Moriha's heart thundered. She'd never been to Morocco before, but she saw it instantly in her mind. Leo and her, walking on the beach at night, the warmth, the palm trees, and the whisper of a place so far from everything she knew. She'd never been to Morocco before, but she wanted to run, to escape, to be free, to follow this magnetic pull that made no sense but felt truer than anything. But she was a mother. "I'd want to bring my son," she said quietly. "Of course," Leo agreed. The next days were a blur of hushed conversations, secret plans, heart-racing moments where she questioned everything and then rushed forward anyway. On the morning of April 1st, while her husband left for work at dawn, Moriha packed two small suitcases and took her son by the hand. At the airport, she nearly fainted when she saw the tickets. "Oh my God, first class?" she thought to herself. No one had ever treated her like this. No one had ever looked at her and seen magic. As she stood in line at the check-in counter, her heart pounded with a wild mix of fear and excitement. She was stepping out of the life she had known and into the arms of a man she had never touched, yet who felt like home. Chapter 4. The moment Moriha stepped off the plane in Casablanca, reality hit her like a wave. The air was totally different. She was so far from home, shocked and full of adrenaline, yet excited to meet Leo. What am I doing? She thought, her arms wrapped around her sleeping son as they made their way through the arrivals hall. And then she saw him. Leo, silver gray hair that shimmered under the dim airport lights, sun-bronzed skin, the brightest green eyes she had ever seen, dressed in white linen pants and a matching shirt. His smile lit up the entire room, and for a moment, all her doubts dissolved. She knew this was the man of her dreams, at least his appearance. He wrapped his arms around her and her son in a warm, lingering embrace, and just like that, they became real to each other. The long drive through the Moroccan night to Marrakech was a blur of adrenaline and quiet intimacy. Their fingers intertwined in the dark as her son slept peacefully in the back seat. For the first time in her life, Moriha felt both terrified and alive, as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind blowing in her hair. That first night, as they settled into the hotel room, her heart raced. She lay next to a man she believed could hear her thoughts, her mind a tangled storm of excitement and fear. Somehow, between the racing heartbeat and the silent prayers for peace, she drifted into sleep. But by morning, the fairy tale began to crack. A cold crept into her body, and her period arrived, and intimacy, well, the way she had imagined it, slipped just out of reach. Leo, however, was persistent, dominant. His desires crossed lines she hadn't known how to defend, and though her heart believed it was love, her voice often fell silent when she should have said no. It was painful, but she didn't want to upset him. Each day, the same pattern played out, coffee laced with honey and milk, wandering through the maze-like streets of Marrakech, laughter, tension, and then the arguments that left her in tears. Sometimes both of them. A roller coaster of emotions that would leave Morha dizzy and hollow. Leo was unpredictable. One day euphoric, showering her with energy and affection. The next, cold, withdrawn, sharp with words she struggled to translate and understand. He accused her of not listening, of drifting off. But in truth, she was drowning in her own storm of feelings. There were beautiful moments where they went to the beach, played in the sand with her son, wandered through restaurants and souks, even went shopping for Moriha and driving through the beautiful landscape of Morocco. But nothing unfolded the way she had visualized in her meditations. She was sick. The magical vision she had clung to for months had been replaced by a much messier, more human truth. By the 10th day, the dream came crashing down. "It's time for you to go home," Leo said, his voice flat. Moriha was shocked. Home? To what? Morha stared at him, her heart breaking. Back home, everyone was furious, disappointed, unreachable. She had left her life behind for this. She had gambled everything. The flight back to Denmark was a blur of tears and exhaustion. She felt like a stranger in her own country, an idiot who had left everything. And now here she was, alone with her son. She had nothing to offer him. She called the man whom she had left 10 days earlier. She was scared, but she had to give him their son until she had found a solution. When she stepped off the train at the station, her ex-husband was waiting. He took their son wordlessly and walked away, his anger heavy in the air between them. Moriha was alone, homeless. For a few days, she drifted between hotels, dragging her suitcase through the streets, numb with shock. And then she remembered a girl she had met online, someone who lived in a shelter. She made the call, and somehow, a room opened up for her. The next 2 months were some of the darkest in her life. The shelter was cold, loud, and suffocating. She spent her days drawing on the walls, listening to U2, the band she had once despised, and weeping quietly for Leo, for her son, for herself. She meditated, desperate to reconnect to the light she had once felt so strongly, but most days she felt nothing but loss. What had I done? She wondered over and over. She was lost, a soul caught between two worlds, stranded in the aftermath of a love that had felt like destiny, but had left her standing alone in the wreckage. Chapter 5. After spending a little over 2 months in the shelter, surrounded by alcoholics, drug abusers, and other lost souls, she finally got a call from a woman who wanted to help her apply for a room where she was able to get her life together and even live with her son. Shortly after, she was lucky to get a room in a women's house. The transfer to the women's house felt like a miracle. The shelter had been cold and lonely, a place where children were not allowed, where her son was only a memory pressing at her chest. But this new place, right in the heart of the city, opened a small window of light. Here, her son could visit. Here, life began to stir again inside her, even if it was only a flicker. The adjustment wasn't easy. Sharing a kitchen and living room with other single mothers, women who were already further along in their healing, only magnified how broken Moriha still felt. She couldn't talk to anyone, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Her grief still clung to her skin like a second layer. It didn't take long before the weight became too much. One night, unable to stop the spiral of fear, guilt, and longing, Moriha was admitted to a mental hospital. She stayed for 2 weeks, 2 long gray weeks of medication, restless sleep, and the strange, muffled quiet of a ward where everyone was learning to hold themselves together. When she returned to the women's house, something had shifted. She was fragile, yes, but the sharpest edge of her despair had softened. She cried for Leo, still. She clung to his memory like a lifeline. But in the background, the voice of Bono filled her small room, his songs wrapping around her like prayers. And then, slowly, almost invisibly, the miracles began. She quit smoking. She began to care for her body, choosing health over harm. She got custody of her son back, his laughter filling the spaces in her life that had once echoed with silence. 9 months passed, and Moriha stood at the threshold of another new beginning. She came off the medication. She was offered an apartment, the very one she had seen over and over in her meditations. A place with a breathtaking view of the ocean, in the heart of the city. From her window, she watched the light dance on the water and knew. She was healing. She began her studies again. She sat with psychologists and untangled the old knots of childhood trauma. Piece by piece, she stitched herself back together. But there was one thread she could not cut. Leo. Not a day passed without a thought of him, without the ache of memory tightening in her chest. And then, one day, as if summoned by her longing, an email appeared in her inbox. "Send me your number." Her hands trembled, her heart raced. She sent it without hesitation. When the phone rang, she didn't know what voice to use, what version of herself to bring to the call. The conversation was short, sharp-edged. Leo cursed her and hung up. And just like that, the wound split open again. Why was he doing this to her? And when would this pain leave? Moriha held fast to her son, to the fragile life she had rebuilt. She would never leave him. He was her anchor, her reason to go on. But there were days when the ache felt so large she feared it might swallow her whole. And yet, even in the darkness, she kept walking. Chapter 6. 11 years, 1 month, and 1 week. That's how long it had been since Moriha last saw Leo. In that time, she had crossed deserts and oceans, returned to Morocco again and again, sometimes with her son, sometimes alone. Each visit peeling away another layer of grief, another wound, another piece of the past. But Leo was never there. He had returned to the U.S. shortly after those first 10 days, and his absence had become the shape of her longing. Over the years, his voice reached her only in flashes, a few brief, sharp conversations, arguments that always ended with slammed words and silence. Still, she carried him. Through other relationships, through her marriage, through her heartbreak, Leo remained. She asked herself countless times why they had ever met. What was the point of the crossing of their paths, the earthquake of connection, the unbearable aftermath? Was he her twin flame, as she once believed? Or was he a lesson cloaked in the disguise of love? Sometimes she wondered if he was a kind of poison, a beautiful, dangerous pull into the shadows. Sometimes she thought he was a mirror, sent to crack her open, to force her to face everything she had buried. And sometimes, when the nights were quiet, and she let her thoughts drift back to his smile, his eyes, even his cruelty, she felt only gratitude. The tears that had once come daily softened over time. For 6 years, she wept for him, aching with a pain so sharp it felt endless. But today, the missing had transformed. It no longer tore her apart. It whispered through her like a song she had learned to live with. She could still cry. Even now, the memory of his green eyes, the way his voice both thrilled and wounded her, could draw tears. But she no longer lost herself inside the sorrow. She had learned the secret to peace, to remember the good and the bad, and to hold both without breaking. Leo would always be the love of her life. And yet, after 11 years, Moriha had finally done what once felt impossible. She had turned inward, fully, without distraction, without chasing a phantom. She knew what she wanted now. She had become the author of her own life, not just on the pages of her books, but in the quiet choices of each day. She had stopped asking the world for answers Leo could and would never give her. And then, not long ago, something stirred inside her, something wild and luminous, a spiritual awakening, deep and undeniable, like the universe itself opening a door within her chest. She no longer needed Leo to awaken her. She was awake now. Chapter 7. Moriha stood by the window of her apartment, watching the sun slip below the horizon, the ocean turning gold, then violet, then deep blue. The view that once felt like a distant dream was now her everyday reality. A quiet miracle she had woven into being through years of healing, falling, getting back up. For a long time, her life had been divided into two chapters, before Leo and after Leo. But something was shifting now, not outside of her, but deep within. The awakening had come slowly, like dawn. It hadn't arrived in a blinding revelation, but in small, glimmering moments, standing barefoot in the sand with her son, writing late into the night under a flickering candle, sitting cross-legged on the floor in meditation, when a rush of peace filled her chest like warm light. She began to sense a larger pattern in everything: the pain, the joy, the questions, the silence. Leo was no longer a wound. He had become a teacher, though not the kind she had imagined. His presence in her life had broken her open, forced her into the dark, and in the dark she had learned to light her own flame. One morning, as she brewed coffee and watched the ocean breathe against the shore, Moria caught her reflection in the window, and for the first time in years, she saw someone she loved. She still thought of Leo. She probably always would. Sometimes his name would appear in an old email thread. Sometimes his face would flash through her dreams. And when the memories came, they no longer dragged her under. She could smile softly, even through the tears, and whisper to herself, "Thank you. You were the storm that taught me how to build shelter." Her writing flourished. Words poured from her like rivers, stories shaped from her scars and her healing. Readers from across the world reached out, touched by the vulnerability she offered on the page. And quietly, steadily, her books became known. Her voice no longer just a whisper, but a call that rippled through the lives of others. Her relationship with her son deepened. Together, they traveled, laughed, danced barefoot in the living room. He was the greatest proof of all that life continues, that love does not vanish when we break, but often grows stronger in the places we feared were ruined. Moriha still met herself in meditation, still felt the soft hum of the universe moving through her. She no longer searched for twin flame signs or waited for messages from Leo. Her eyes were open to the everyday magic around her: the sunlight on her skin, the strangers who smiled on the street, the feeling of coming home to herself. And when people asked if she was happy, Moriha smiled. Not the brittle smile she used to give, but one that came from her chest, from the quiet center of her being. "I am whole," she would say. "I am here." Chapter 8. It had been almost 12 years. Moriha's life had become a tapestry of small joys and hard-won peace. Her apartment still overlooked the ocean. Her writing filled the world with stories, and her days were brightened by the laughter of not just her son, who was now a young man, but also her daughter, a little girl with fierce eyes and a wild heart. There had been no lasting love after Leo, not because she was incapable of love, but because somewhere along the way, she had discovered that her heart first belonged to herself, and she guarded that truth fiercely. Then, on an ordinary Thursday morning, as sunlight poured into the kitchen and the smell of coffee drifted through the air, her phone buzzed. An email. The sender's name made her breath catch in her throat. Leo. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked it open, but her heart stayed steady. It was no longer the storm it once was. Morihi, the email read. I don't know why, but I keep thinking of you lately. How are you? Send me your number. For a moment, the room blurred around her. The years folded in on themselves. His voice was in her ears again, laughing, teasing, sharp, tender, impossible. She sat down slowly at the table, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She remembered the last time they had spoken, how the call had ended in curses and slammed silence. She remembered the years of tears, the aching, the unanswered questions. She remembered the girl she had been, trembling, desperate, seeking something she couldn't name. And then she thought of the woman she was now. She looked at her daughter playing on the rug, the ocean glittering outside her window, the stack of manuscripts on her desk, the woman in the reflection, whole, wild, scarred, and beautiful. A soft smile curved her lips. She typed slowly, deliberately, each word a choice, not a surrender. Hello, Leo. I hope you are well. I'm good, truly good. This is my number. Wishing you peace and light. She hit send. And then she closed the laptop, set her phone down, and turned toward the life that was waiting for her. Her life. If Leo replied, it would no longer be her undoing. For the first time in 12 years, she knew. The love of her life was not the man who left, but the woman who stayed. Chapter 9. The next morning, before the sun had even lifted over the ocean, her phone vibrated softly on the nightstand. Moriha opened her eyes slowly, half expecting it to be a dream. But the screen glowed with a single notification. It was Leo. Can we talk? I miss you. Her heart gave a small, surprised stutter. Not the wild pounding it once would have, but a flicker of something deep, old, familiar. She sat at the edge of her bed, the ocean breeze slipping through the window, her daughter stirring softly in the next room. For a long time, she stared at the message. Memories rushed in. His laughter, his sharp words, the electric connection that had torn her apart and remade her. She remembered the years of silence, of trying to make sense of it all, of carrying both love and grief like twin flames in her chest. This time, she didn't rush to reply. She rose, made coffee, braided her daughter's hair, and watched the sunlight dance on the floor. Her writing blossomed, and readers were writing to her from around the world, touched by her honesty, her ability to name the things others were afraid to say. She spoke at events, sat on panels, led workshops where women traced the threads of their own heartbreaks and rediscovered their power. Some days, in quiet moments, she still would pause and think of Leo, a ripple in her chest, a soft ache, but no longer a wound. She could love the memory of him without losing herself. She had made peace with the mystery of it, with the questions that had no answers. Sometimes at night, her daughter would request from her a good-night story, and Moriha would smile, pull her close, and say, "Once there was a girl who thought she needed to chase the stars." But one day, she looked in the mirror and found they were already inside her. Her daughter would giggle, curl deeper into her arms, and Moriha would close her eyes, breathing in the sweet, simple grace of her life now. Only later, when the house was quiet again, did she sit down, take a breath, and type, "Leo, we can talk, but please, Only if we speak from a place of kindness and peace. That's the only road I walk now. When she hit send, she felt no fear. Only curiosity. Only openness. And whatever came next, she knew. It would not break her. She was whole. Chapter 10. The phone rang 2 days later. Moriha almost didn't answer. Her fingers hovered over the screen, her breath soft, her heart steady. She glanced at her daughter, drawing quietly by the window, at the peaceful hum of her apartment, at the life she had built with her own hands. And then, she answered. Moriha! Leo's voice came through, older, rougher, but still unmistakable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I've been thinking of you, he said at last, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I know, Morha whispered. They talked, carefully, tenderly, as if touching something fragile. There were no declarations of love, no wild promises, just two people acknowledging the bond that had shaped them, the wound they had both carried. I was awful to you, Leo murmured once, unexpected and raw. Moriha smiled, tears stinging her eyes. We both were. We were broken people trying to fix ourselves through each other. When they hung up, she felt lighter, not because a fairy tale had been rekindled, but because they had finally spoken the truth aloud. And she knew, whatever they were, whatever they would be, she was free now. Chapter 11. Spring arrived like a blessing. Morha walked through the city streets with her daughter, cherry blossoms drifting down around them like pink snow. She laughed, her hair loose in the wind, her face turned toward the sun. She had learned to love the small things, the quiet mornings, the way her daughter sang to the flowers, the way her son called just to say, I'm proud of you, Mom. Her writing deepened, not because she was chasing success, but because she was writing from a place of truth. Her next book was about healing, about the way some loves tear us apart so we can put ourselves back together stronger. Her life was here, now, vivid, full, unshakable. And when she stood at her window at night, looking out over the city lights, she felt it in her chest like a steady drumbeat. I am here. I am whole. I am free. Weeks had passed since the call. Leo would sometimes send short messages, a photo of a sunrise, a song he wanted her to hear, a brief, thinking of you. Moriha answered when she felt called to. She didn't wait by the phone. She didn't shape her life around his attention. She had learned, through all the years and heartbreak, that love without freedom was just another kind of cage. One afternoon, she sat on her balcony with a notebook in her lap, her daughter napping inside, the ocean shimmering in the distance. Her phone buzzed. It was Leo texting her. You've changed. I can feel it. I wish I had been the man you deserved back then. Moriha smiled softly, a warmth blooming in her chest. She typed back slowly, deliberately. We met exactly as we were meant to. We were teachers for each other. And now we are where we're meant to be. There was no anger in her, no longing to rewrite the past. Only gratitude, only release. For the first time, she knew she could love him and let him go, without breaking. Chapter 12. Morha's life blossomed in ways she hadn't dared dream. Her latest book became a quiet sensation, touching hearts across continents. Women wrote to her, telling her how her story mirrored their own. At readings, she stood before rooms of strangers and spoke of grief, rebirth, and the wild, defiant act of choosing to live fully. Her children thrived beside her. Her son, thoughtful and steady, guided his little sister through life with the same fierce love Moriha had once poured into him. This was the real magic. Not the wild, untamed passion of the past, but the steady, luminous joy of presence and watching her children grow. I am here, she thought, and that is enough. Sometimes late at night, she would sit by the window and remember Leo's laughter, his storms, the joy and the burn. But now, those memories were like old songs she loved, not wounds. She had outgrown the ache. She was at peace. It was autumn when Leo one day surprised her. not with a plane ticket or a grand gesture, but with a quiet voice message. I'm coming to Europe for a few weeks. Would you meet me for coffee? For a moment, Moriha's chest tightened. The woman she was now, the life she had built, it all flashed before her. She closed her eyes, breathing into the stillness she had fought so hard for. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat with the question like a stone in her palm, turning it over gently. She watched her daughter dance in the kitchen, watched the clouds shift over the ocean, felt her son's quiet presence as he strummed his guitar in the next room. When she finally replied, it was with a simple message. I'm going to be busy the next couple of months, Leo, but I wish you a great journey. Moriha. It was a hard decision, but as much as she wanted to meet up with Leo after all these years, she knew she was better off. She was standing in the space where she could love him without needing him, where she could choose herself without closing her heart. And for the first time, the thought of Leo arriving didn't feel like an earthquake. It felt like a breeze she could stand in, without fear of being swept away. Later that night, when the house was still, Morha lit a candle by the window, closed her eyes, and whispered a quiet blessing. Thank you, for the love that shaped me, for the love I've given, and for the love I am. Chapter 13. Winter settled gently over the city, painting rooftops in frost and bathing the ocean in a pale silver light. Moriha's days moved with calm rhythm now. Mornings spent walking her daughter to school, afternoons curled up with a pen in hand and a candle burning beside her. Her son had moved out, but he visited often, his presence always steady, grounding. She hadn't heard from Leo for weeks. No drama, no argument, just a silence that stretched longer each day. At first, she told herself he was busy, then that he needed space, and finally, she allowed herself to believe the truth she already knew. He had slipped back into the ether from which he came. And yet, unlike the silence of the past, this one didn't shatter her. There were no spirals, no sleepless nights, no begging the universe for answers. Only a soft ache, a quiet knowing. She thought of him now and then, when a certain song played, when the light hit the water just right, when her daughter laughed in a way that made the air shimmer with something unnameable. But she didn't chase him, she didn't wait. Instead, she filled the space he once occupied with life, pages of writing, deep belly laughter with friends, slow Sunday mornings, poetry whispered under breath. Then, one Tuesday morning, she found it. A plain envelope, no return address, slipped between the gas bill and a real estate flyer. Inside, a single postcard. The photo on the front was breathtaking, a sunrise over a mountain she had once seen in a meditation years ago, jagged peaks silhouetted against a sky that bled gold and violet. She turned it over, her breath catching. No name, no greeting, just 5 words written in careful, slanted handwriting. You were always the sunrise. Her fingers trembled slightly. For a moment, the room fell away. She stood at the edge of all the years, the longing, the burning, the falling, the rising, and something inside her settled. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for her phone. She simply stood there, sunlight pooling at her feet, the postcard a small sacred weight in her hand. She tucked it into her journal, between pages filled with memories, prayers, and wild dreams she had once whispered into the night. Then she made tea, sat by the window, and wrote. Because this quiet, steady becoming, was her great love story. She all of a sudden recalled a conversation Leo and her had back then, about marriage, about the clothes they would wear and the expensive cars they would one day be driving. Leo would say, I imagine me in white and you in blue. She smiled. She recalled his words as if it was yesterday they had spoken. The world moved on around her, full of noise and chaos and questions. But within her, there was only stillness. She no longer needed answers. Only this moment, only this breath, only the light rising within her. And Moriha knew. She knew that if her and Leo were to ever meet again, it would happen, The universe would make it happen. Until that day, Morha were fulfilled by all her achievements, and that was enough for her. She had everything she could dream of and more. She was happy.